get anonymous feedback on the overall performance of your remote team or your individual virtual leaders using a simple-to-use, cost-effective, and mobile-friendly online team assessment. Learn more at www.settolead.com.
Welcome to the Set to Lead podcast, the online mentoring platform for emerging and current leaders. My name is Marianne Samdi, leadership coach and talent development expert, and I will be your host. Welcome, Darryl.
Hi, how you doing, Marianne?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the show. I'm excited about today's show. It's going to be about ways to show up with courage in corporate America as a Black professional. But before we get into it, tell the listeners a little bit about your background and why you can speak to this topic.
Sure thing. I spend a lot of time as one of the folks running Catapult Leaders. Catapult Leaders is a top executive firm when it comes to finding talented Black professionals in a variety of areas, and so I spend my time working with companies and working with talented individuals, matching them up. And so I have an understanding of what is needed, what is necessary, to evolve. I worked in the corporate world myself, spent some time as an Army officer, and have been an entrepreneur for a while here now, creating organizations ultimately that are designed to help folks. So that's kind of what I do there. So I speak about this all the time. I talk to groups and individuals all the time. Finally, I am an executive coach, have been, and a life coach, have been for 20 plus years now. And so I get a chance to do what I used to tell my kids when they were young, that all I do is work with people to help them achieve their dreams. I said, it's the greatest job in the world. So that's why I hope that I can add value today to your conversation.
Oh, thank you for telling our listeners a little bit about your background. So obviously you've seen some things and you know some things. So with that, I wanted to ask you first, how do you prepare, or how do you tell your clients to prepare to be the best advocate they can be in the workplace for themselves?
That's a great question. I think that the folks who work with me throughout the years would say he's always going to say this to you so that you can be your best out there. Number one, you have to believe in who you are. Absolutely. That's the starting place for all happiness and success. Number two, you have to do the work to be great. Many folks want to be great, but the work it requires to be great, to achieve your highest professional goals, is extraordinary. It involves self-management. It involves management of relationships with others. So you got to do that work. You got to learn. You got to constantly grow. You have to not be fearful. Number three, I think you have to be willing. This is where most people fall short. You have to be willing to speak up and take your shot. The fact is that what you want is out there for you, but it will not be given to you, and it will not be easy. So if you want it, you have to be willing to take your shot. You could be the greatest shooter in the world, to use a sports analogy. You could be the greatest basketball player in the world. But if you don't shoot, or if you shoot infrequently, we will never know it. And it'd be a shame to get to the end of your career, the end of your time, and realize too late that I should have been a better advocate for who I am. I should have worked diligently for what I want, as opposed to waiting for others to do it for me.
Those are some great tips. Over the years, I'm curious if you have examples on some common mistakes that you've seen, in particularly from Black professionals, that limit their success opportunities.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. Now, let me first say that we can acknowledge, as if we have to, but we can acknowledge that the playing field is infrequently level. So let's just put that, but the truth is, I believe in working on dealing with what you can change, not things that are beyond your scope. So right now we're talking one-to-one. I would say this, the biggest mistake that I've seen Black professionals make over the years is they tend to center unknown others and fears in their energy. They center them. They center others and their fears in their energy. If you center others and fears in your energy, you are going to fail. You'll be unhappy. It's going to work. Let me give some examples. Too many are too concerned about what others think of them, what others think of their hair, what others think of their skin color, and so forth. That's not productive to be concerned about it. The truth is, concern is really just a fear. That's what concern is. It's a fear. And being fearful never added $1 to your wallet, never added 1 year to your life, or to a life, and it never added one promotion to your career. So what's the use of it? Fear is simply not productive. So mistakes come when you're fearful. A mistake of omission and commission. You could not speak up. You could not make a recommendation. You could not write that report. You could not get it in. You could not connect with the right people because of your concern with how those people, whoever those people are, might see you. My point is this: the biggest mistake is centering others and your fears. Don't center them in how you make your decisions. Believe, as I said in the first question you asked me, my first point was you got to believe in who you are, and you got to do that work. And so the mistake is that, and what that causes, what that fear, what that concern causes is, again, as I said earlier, people are not aggressive in making sure that they evolve, that they get better. They're not assertive in speaking up at the right times. They don't write that recommendation with the strength, the passion, the forcefulness, and the nuance required to get it through because they're concerned. When you're carrying all that extra weight, the burden of being concerned, which is a choice, by the way. Again, I stipulated up front, the playing field is not always level. But the fact is, when you carry that burden all the time, you're never going to be your best. You're never going, as that means you're going to limit your success opportunities, which is the question you asked.
So I want to stay there for a minute. And I definitely understood what you're saying, that there's too much reliance on concern instead of jumping forward into it. But do you think there's a difference between concern versus thoughtfulness? Because now you might replace concern with going for it and aggressive action, or assertive action, I should say. But then there needs to be some thoughtfulness or mindfulness to your actions, right?
I think there needs to be mindfulness and thoughtfulness. Yes, I agree with that. But that comes as a byproduct. True thoughtfulness, true mindfulness, as opposed to being fearful and concerned, comes as a byproduct of, how do I say this? Comes as a byproduct of not centering others, but centering your goals and you and your life and your possibilities. You see, again, I go back to the point about not taking a shot, those sorts of things. If you are risk averse, we'll never find out how great you could be, which is another, I could call that as another mistake. If you're risk averse, you won't raise your game. See, the problem with mindfulness and thoughtfulness, there's no problem with it. But what happens, that really is simply a mask of being risk averse, being fearful. If you're that, you won't raise your game. Your performance level will not rise up, because unless you believe that you have the right to have that thing you're going for, unless you center yourself in that and say, you know what, I can do this, I'm going to do this, then that lack of belief will limit your possibilities. You simply won't be the person you could be. And you want to be that person. So I think, and for example, and I just, if you don't mind, I will go a little deeper on this. I think that all of this, when I talk about those mistakes, all of these mistakes lead also to not being your authentic self. See, concern of and centering others, you won't be who you could be. You should always, of course, learn and evolve. I mean, that's part of being thoughtful. You should learn. You should have a plan and work it out. So many people I talk to say they want to reach it to the top, but they don't really have a plan, because they didn't center that goal in, okay, now how do I get there? Here's what I need to do. Here's who I need to meet. Here's how I speak, that sort of thing. But the truth is that you need to be you, so that when you do make it and achieve your professional goals, you have no regrets and you like who you are. And that's that part about being authentic. See, that's the thing. When all of us who've had kids have had a kid coming to us at one time who said, well, Everybody's doing X, whatever X is. You know, and of course, you probe one as a parent, you probe the question, well, wait a minute, who's everyone? That's number one. So they're all doing it. And of course, it always falls apart. It's not because kids, that's that peer pressure. They center the group, too many of them, center the group in their thinking, which always leads them astray and to underperform. So my point about this is that, yes, be thoughtful, be mindful, but you have got to have the assertiveness to take your shot. Taking your shot means you've done the work, by the way. You wouldn't, again, use an analogy, you wouldn't walk on a basketball court and just start throwing up shots if you never practiced. It takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of intention, but it takes a lot of belief, because you're not going to do the work. You're not going to take the shots. You're not going to practice. You're not going to spend those hours perfecting that document, that recommendation you would make at work, unless you believe, hey, listen, I'm going to put the very best proposal in front of you. It's going to be so good, so crystal clear. It's going to knock them out. But you notice what I said with her. I centered that by saying, I'm going to put the proposal. I didn't say, I wonder what they want. I wonder if they're going to accept it. I wonder if they like me. I wonder. Too much. Even if centering other people in that way and their thoughts, their imaginary thoughts in your life was something that you actually, it could be true. There are times certainly when it was always true. But it's true, it doesn't lead you to the goal. You've got to have that kind of focus on being great, not on being okay, but on being great. Too few of us say, I'm here to be great, to ourselves. Because when you say that, you hold yourself to a higher standard. You hold yourself to a level of performance and focus and energy that others simply cannot match.
Thank you for that additional clarity. And you said there was a lot of great nuggets in there that I'm not going to unpack today, but just FYI, I love the fact that you talked about you have to like who you are. And without doing that internal work, you're not going to be prepared to be courageous in corporate America. And I thought that was a really great point. There's a popular quote that says, feedback is the breakfast of champions. I think that's a quote that's been tagged to Ken Blanchard. What are your thoughts on that quote?
Well, two things. It is a great quote, but two things. One, we should all, anyone that wants to move themselves to the top as a person, personally, professionally, we should all seek out constructive feedback, because it is the pathway to your highest achievements. It really is. Most people, however, seek to avoid feedback. And as the kids say, that's why they lose. You cannot avoid constructive feedback. Now, I agree, and let me amend it. I agree that constructive feedback is the breakfast of champions. More important is that if you learn from the feedback you get and you take massive and immediate action to leverage what you learn, then you can be successful. Again, most don't learn from constructive feedback, and most don't take massive and immediate action with what the feedback tells them to do. That's the key. It's not simply, I will personalize this a little bit. Many years ago, when I first got started in the corporate world, I had a boss of mine, nice guy, liked him, nice guy. And early on, maybe a week or two into our time together, this was my very first corporate job. I had a meeting with him, and I said, listen, his name was Mark. I said, listen, Mark, here's the deal. I said, do me a favor. I said, I like feedback, but I want to get it early. What I don't want you to do is wait to give me feedback until my performance evaluation. What I don't want you to do is wait 3 months to give me feedback, or 6 months. What I want you to do is, if you see me doing something that I could be doing better, I want to hear about it in that moment. Tell me right then. I'm okay. You may pull me aside or something if we're among us, but tell me right then. I said, my goal is to get better. Here's my payoff to that story. Now, I wasn't doing it planned. That actually is where I am. I want to know, right? Later on, right before I think that got promoted, I saw what he had written and had been saying in meetings about the young me. He said that Darryl won't let me be a bad manager. He requires me to give him feedback so he can get better. My point about sharing that story, and it is an absolutely true story, is that you have to take charge of feedback. Don't simply wait for it. Ask for it because you want to know. And again, here's my analogy. If you and I, Marianne, are driving in a car and I take a right turn at some stoplight and you know it's wrong, you're not going to wait 60 miles to tell me, by the way, you took a wrong turn 60 miles ago. I want to know. You say, oh, by the way, you want to do a U-turn here because the place is back there. I saw the sign. Oh, okay, thanks. You see what I'm saying? It's the same process. But too many of us avoid getting feedback. We don't want to get it. I love getting it. Now, I like for it to be constructive, but I love getting it. And you have to love feedback. It's the only way you're going to climb the steps to professional and personal success is to deal with feedback and make it your own, to learn from it, take it, shape it into something you can use and evolve so that you're better each and every day.
Darryl, I believe that there's some people out there, professionals, Black professionals, and there might be other nationalities that feel this way. They feel that they love themselves so much that they are not able to identify constructive feedback because they don't believe that they can do any wrong. And for them to accept that feedback would mean that they are not as great or wonderful as they may think.
I agree with you.
How would you, is there a rubric or some way of identifying what constructive feedback is when it has to do with you?
There is no player, again, I'll use an analogy because we can all accept this thing. There's no player, there's no military officer, and I was a military officer. There's no environment where an individual can become great on their own in a particular area. You can't do it. You have to have feedback. That's called coaches. You have to have feedback as you develop and as you grow to become you, because you can't see the entire field. You can't see everything. That person giving you constructive feedback, again, assume it's your boss, your manager. That person giving you constructive feedback, he or she, what do they know? They know the kind of things that the higher ups are looking for. They know what works, what doesn't work. They know what has caused people to fail. You have to assume this. That's part of the process. You can't go around thinking everybody's an idiot but you, or you're really going to be the only idiot in the room. That's the truth. So the fact is, if your ego won't let you get feedback, then prepare to fail. Prepare to fail, because you will. You will. Now, does everyone give you constructive feedback? No. Is everyone capable of giving you powerful constructive feedback? No. But I will say this, for those out there who will say their bosses never give constructive feedback. If you're waiting for your boss to be great before you can be great, then you're probably going to be unhappy in life. There are a few greats at any level. Nobody is perfect. You're not perfect. They're not perfect. But sometimes you can pull the constructive feedback out of just plain feedback. In fact, that's got to be your task. That's got to be your goal. If you're that good, if your ego is that large, you should be able to hear feedback and pull from it the powerful nuggets that can take you to another level. Because if you cannot do that, then you're not as good as you think you are. You're not as smart as you think you are.
Thank you so much, Darryl. I'm sure you've heard the term drop the mic. I didn't want to call it out while you were saying it, but I thought that was a wonderful nugget right there when you said, if you're expecting your boss to be great before you become great, you're not going in the right path. So thank you for saying that.
Sure.
How important do you feel it is to find a career sponsor? And is there a right way to do that?
Well, I noticed you asked about sponsors, not mentors, and there is a difference. And I'm going to talk to the sponsorship thing. I think this question is one that many people, and I'm going to give an example or two, perhaps, I'm thinking here now at the end about ways to do it. But in almost all situations, as I kind of intimated before, it will be impossible to achieve your highest possibilities in your professional life unless you have a sponsor. And when I say sponsor, I'm not talking about someone who's just a nice person with you. They may be nice, may not. What I'm talking about, when I say sponsor, I'm talking about a person who has influence in your organization, who believes in your talent and potential, such that she or he will speak up on your behalf, either formally or informally, in meetings and with other influencers in the organization. The thing is, these are meetings and I learned this early in life, these are meetings you will never be in yourself until you reach, certain levels in your organization. So your sponsor will be in meetings you're not there. They'll have conversation with people you won't know. They may be friends or be good acquaintances with somebody in part of the organization who also has influence. And those little conversations, those comments, hey, I met Marianne. She's fantastic. You said you're looking for a person to do X, Y, and Z. You want to keep an eye on Marianne. That little nugget right there makes the world spin. It just does. Now, how do you find a sponsor? This is a question that I get asked a lot. And again, the burden is on you. Here's what I mean. You've got to identify one or more influential people in your organization. They're there. They're around you. They may be highly ranked. They might be somebody who's a long-term player in the company, but maybe they're not at the top of the company or not really near the very top of the company, but they know where the bodies are buried. That crowd, okay? That crowd. You got to identify them. You have to also assume that that person that you identified as influential in the company got where they are because of performance and because they know things that you one day should know. You have to assume that, because if it's too easy to assume that somebody got there for some nefarious reason or because they're afraid, whatever the case may be, because that's just that doesn't require you to do any work. You have to make an assumption that, okay, wait a minute, that person that I see, this person who's a whatever level in this organization, he or she, man, think of what they must know. Think of what they've experienced. Think of the people they know. Think of the opportunities they know about that I'll never hear about. Okay, you know what? That person is important. Once you've identified them, once you have your mind right and you're assuming these things about them, which you certainly should, then there's a reality kicks in. And the reality is they can't ever advocate for you if they don't know you. Obviously, they can't advocate for the person they don't know. So what does that mean? You have to meet them, ask them to lunch. Then when you meet them, however you meet them, lunch, coffee, whatever, 15 minutes, whatever, then you need to probe their minds about the business, the opportunities, what they see out there. This shows that you're raising your game. And the only person who asks about the strategic direction, the bigger thoughts in the company, is a person who thinks strategically and who has bigger thoughts. The truth is, when you do that, you're signaling to that person without ever having to ask them to sponsor you. And by the way, I don't know that you should ask someone to sponsor you, but be that as it may, I'm not advising that at all. My point is, if you're being the right things, if you establish that relationship, if you regularly tap in by talking about bigger ideas, what's going on in the organization, then you become a person who says, this is interesting. He or she, that being you, is the only one at that level who's ever reached out to me to have lunch or coffee to talk about whatever direction the company's going or major efforts or thoughts like that. That right there, you're separating yourself. You're separating yourself and saying, hey, I believe in who I am. I'm authentic. I'm willing to do the work to be great. That is an example of taking your shot. And if you establish that relationship, it's going to be hard for that person not to advocate for you when the time comes. He or she certainly will. And as you evolve, you don't go into that meeting, those first meetings, and say, hey, by the way, I want you to advocate for me. As I said, I would not do it that way. I would simply be a person worthy of being advocated for, worthy of having a sponsor. And as I say, nature will take its course. There will come a time when you're talking to someone where you may talk about, the relationship has evolved, and you're doing well in the organization, you may talk about how does one make sure they're right for this role or that role, the roles that are out there that you may wish. He or she is going to tell you. And let me tell you something, when they tell you, make sure you have a pad of paper and you're writing it down. I don't want to be old school, but I will tell you there's something symbolic in somebody starting to write down what someone says. It says that you think that what I'm saying to you is important. It says that you're going to take action with what I'm telling you. It says that you're not like the rest of the people. You want to know. And when you do that with someone who has influence, he or she it's just going to happen. Will say things about you, will stand up for you. If they're in those meetings, I remember when I got to a certain level in the corporate world, I was in performance evaluation meetings a lot with other folks about their people. And oftentimes somebody would pipe up with a comment about a person who wasn't even in their reporting line. they would say something like, hey, listen, I saw, so forth. I saw Mary Ann, on the project that she was doing with my team, and she was quite the leader. She spoke up. She really broke through. They were stumped on a problem, and she kind of led them through a problem-solving process. It was quite impressive. So I've seen her do that, whatever that is. And my point is, those are the kind of conversations that are had in those rooms that as I used to always describe it, that you will never find yourself in. But you want those conversations to happen with someone who's influential. That is a sponsor, and that's how you get them.
Darryl, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to share that early in my career, I realized that a sponsor, a good one, an effective one, isn't always the one with the distinguished titles. Because sometimes you might identify a sponsor because they have a big title behind their name, but then in actuality, they're not respected among their peers.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you not make that mistake when you're looking for a sponsor?
I think a few things. One is, I think that everyone from whom you get feedback, information, like sponsors, can be productive for you. I will say that. But let me talk about an example. So again, early in my career, there was this guy named Al, who he was down the hallway. I actually never knew Al's title, but he'd been there for a long time. When I started, he'd been there maybe 30 years, 35. So he'd been there a long time. And Al was one of those guys who, whatever he was doing, I don't know what his title was, but he seemed to always know the answers to things. You meet him, he always knew things. Again, he knew where the bodies were buried. And so I developed this habit, just he was a friendly guy. I developed this habit of dropping in on the Al every once in a while, and just chatting about, hey, what's going on, Al? How you doing? Blah, 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 blah. Al had enormous influence because Al, while not one of those senior ranked people, he was often in the room with that, because he was doing things involving these projects. So he'd often be in a room. He was an experienced guy. And Al was a major advocate for me. I didn't know it until many, many years later. He'd long since left the organization and that sort of thing. Many years later, that he would always talk about this, this Darryl kid who came in and asked questions and was working on a project, and he did blah, blah, blah. My point is, you're right. They're not always the people at the top. Now, having said that, and to address your point specifically, I wouldn't advise people to worry about whether a person they look at and they identify as being influential is well liked in the company or whatever, because you're getting, as I say, you're operating on information that may be above your pay grade. Basically, it's unnecessary, because you don't have to have just one person who will sponsor you. You have to assume if you meet 5 people that you think could be sponsors, and you do the process of meeting with them and that sort of stuff. Okay, 1 out of 5, maybe 2 out of 5 will be but 3 out of 5 are powerful. Plus, listen, even a knucklehead sponsor, even a person who's a knucklehead, if they're in that room and they, murmur something positive about you, that's better than them saying nothing, and better than them saying, something negative, obviously. So I would simply collect my sponsors, if you will, collect my sponsors. Like Al, I didn't think of him as a sponsor. Looking back, he was simply one of the people, though, who was influential in his own way. And you combine him with other people that came to know me, that came to be sponsors of mine. It was quite the push, the wind beneath my wings, as it were. It was quite that sort of thing there. So I think you're right. There can be sponsored level people who may not be well liked everywhere, well regarded everywhere, but you don't put all your eggs in one basket either. Again, with the point I would bring up to your point is, you should have more than one sponsor.
Excellent feedback. Thank you for that. How can we rethink the way individuals, teams, or even organizations assess African-American candidates to minimize bias?
Well, I spend, as president of Catapult Leaders, I spend every working day working with companies to help them evolve in these areas and become, more inclusive. That's large part of my job at Catapult Leaders. So I spend my time doing that. That's my role. I work with them. And we're experienced enough. Our team here, we're experienced enough that we can lean into companies a bit, and they know we've been there, done that. So there's a respect there. We're talking to try to change. Now, having said all of that, for the folks who are talent looking to move up, looking to be in environments that are better for them, looking to grow professionally, and they're not doing what I'm doing as, catapulting as a job. I would say the best way for those is to do their part, is to live an answer that I gave to you earlier. And that is, they have to believe in who they are. They have to do the work to be great at work. They have to speak up and take their shot, a thoughtful shot, but take their shot. See, that way, we're working from both the inside and the outside to affect change. I do think that it can be a heavy burden. I mentioned that term earlier, but it can be a heavy burden to try to, if you're on the inside of an organization, to try to do all the work to change everything immediately, because it's simply, it's not going to happen immediately. No change like that, when you're dealing with mindsets, both conscious and unconscious, will happen immediately. So it takes time, but the key is to make sure that you're doing your part, that you're doing what you can do to be great at what you do, to be great, to be the biggest advocate for who you are yourself. Ultimately, your biggest advocate has got to be you and how you do things. If you do what you're doing and create that inside pressure, and then organizations like mine, people like you, Marianne, if we do what we do, then we can slowly move the ball forward. We can make progress happen. It won't always happen as fast as we want. If it happened as fast as we want, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves. But the fact is, we have to make sure that we're getting inside and outside pressure to make organizations better.
Thanks, Darryl.
Welcome.
At the top of the program here, you mentioned that you work with Black executives.
Yes.
I've heard from a lot of Black executives that sometimes they feel isolated and alone when they either get promoted to a higher position or are in a role that's an executive. Do you ever provide tips on how they can remove that feeling of isolation and aloneness?
Yes, I would say, first of all, remember, I'm always about reorienting your thinking on things. I would say this. I would tell those folks, and I do tell them when they ask me, I say, superstars always ultimately feel isolated and alone. They do. They're a superstar. I mean, how many, we can name our favorite athletes, how many folks are like them on their team, in the league? Very, very few. It's the same here. So see yourself, again, believe yourself as, hey, a superstar, a budding superstar. Start with that. You are a Black professional. And I tell this to groups and individuals all the time. You are a Black professional. As a Black professional, you will likely feel isolated and alone several times in your career. If you're successful, even more so. You have to accept that situation, and then you got to reach out to those who can assist, a career coach, that sort of stuff. Marianne, view what you do. Reach out to those who can assist you in dealing with the feelings so you thrive in that moment. So you got to thrive in that environment. We're not trying to survive. That's a different mindset. We're not trying to survive, hang on. We want to thrive. So if you understand that, wait a minute, superstars, ultimately, as they rise up, they will feel alone. That's natural. Then you got to say, okay, wait a minute, given that, well, I know I'm likely, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm going to feel isolated. It's the era we're in. It's the time we're in, the situation we're in. That's going to happen. I don't want people to just survive. I want them to thrive. So being different, and I think this is the mindset change, being different, which is that leads to that feeling of isolation and loneliness. Being different is a blessing. Embrace it, live your best life, and have an attitude that you will go take what's yours. You were put on this earth to win. Everything starts with the mindset. You were put on this earth to win. So being different is a blessing. Embrace it. The truth is, when you're different, and when in a meeting room, let's say there's 20 people in the meeting room. Let's say, for the sake of example, you're the only person in that room who's a Black professional. You know what? You have a unique power, because when you speak up with some powerful, productive bit of information, it will be remembered who you were, because visibly you're different. Oh yeah, that was Darryl. That was Marianne. That was why do they remember him and not the other 18 people? Why? Because visibly you're different. Embrace the difference and say that's the way it's supposed to be, and then push forward and go and get what's yours with the foundation belief you were put on this earth to win.
Listen, this was an excellent conversation, Darryl. I hope it was just as helpful and wonderful to our leader audience. Before we close this session, please tell our listeners how they can follow your work.
You know, the very best thing to do to connect with me is to go on LinkedIn. Just go on LinkedIn and you can type in me, you know, my name. I have an L in the middle of my name, so there are a few Darryl Mobleys on there, but type it in, Catapult Leaders. You could probably type in, if you go to coachmobley.com, that's the coaching side of it. But listen, we're here to win, all of us, you, me, all of us. We work together, we win. That's just a fact. We work together, we win. We have all that we need to succeed and to thrive, all that we need to reach our highest possibilities. We have to believe, take those steps, climb that ladder, and get to the top. And when we do, by example and by energy, others will come with us.
Thanks, Darryl.
Thank you.